Hey there, it's Bobby, aka Paginator, and I'm here today with my January reading wrap up. So, I have quite a few books that I have read in the month of January, and many of them were either audiobooks that I rented from the library or books that I have now taken to the school. So, I will be inserting little pictures here, and I'll hold up what ones I have here with me. We are going to start with an audiobook, which is Daughter of the Morning Star by Craig Johnson. This is the 17th book in the Walt Longmire series. If you haven't read those, what are you doing? They are adult Western mysteries set in the state of Wyoming. Great state to be in. Following Walt Longmire, who is a detective. No, he's the sheriff of Absaroka County and deals with various law enforcement situations. This book series is, of course, the inspiration for the Walt Longmire TV show, which is later then picked up and finished by Netflix. In this installment of the Walt Longmire mysteries, there is a young Native American girl named Jaya who is been, receiving death threats. The tribal police chief calls Walt to help deal with the situation, and of course, Henry Standing Bear, Walt's best friend, is going to get on the action as well, providing some backup, lethal when necessary, because he's Henry. Jaya is a basketball player, and she is phenomenal, and because of some situations that happen in the book, not everyone in the Native community likes her, and there are some strong feelings of negativity towards her. This issue that comes up, that's the major crime of the book, not only is the death threats against Jaya, but the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women is represented in this book, which is a big issue. If you didn't know, the amount of missing and murdered women among the Indigenous people in the United States is massive, and it's massively underreported, underinvestigated, mostly due to lack of resources, but also lack of public response. Like the gal that went missing this summer, actually in Wyoming is where she was found, and she was a blonde white girl, and a lot of times the argument is, well, if she was a Native girl, there wouldn't be that much attention put on her. So this book does deal with that as well, and there is a phenomenal scene at the last basketball game in this book, and I'm just not going to say anymore, but I will tell you that I really enjoyed this book. The audiobooks are amazing. George Guidall is the narrator of all the Walt Longmire books, and he does a fantastic job. So definitely go read those. You can read them out of order, although some things might be a little bit confusing, but they're so worth your time. Up next, we have another adult book. This is a romance, Dr. Strangebeard by Penny Reed. This is number 5 in the Winston Brothers series, I believe. This is about Roscoe, who is the youngest of the Winston brothers. All of them have beards on every cover, beards in every title. And Simone Peyton was his childhood sweetheart. It was, well, not sweetheart, they were best friends, and he was in love with her, but she didn't love him back, and she's now an FBI agent. Roscoe doesn't really understand that, though. She's back in town undercover to try to track down some bad guys, and Roscoe thinks she's just back working at the diner because she got tired of living in Washington, D.C. He has always loved her, never loved anyone else, and so when he realizes she's back, he's going to try to start something up, and she really needs to spend time with Roscoe to get him to help her get the bad guys, because if you've read this series, you'll know Roscoe's father is a piece of garbage, and he's connected to a whole bunch of bad guys. There you go. Romance and sexy times ensue. Up next, we have another audiobook, which was Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I would classify this one as new adult. It is about the son of a ne'er-do-well rock star, and this son is also kind of ne'er-do-well. He's getting into trouble publicly quite often, and the nonprofit that he works for is losing clients because of his misbehaviors. So his boss tells him, you either have to find a solid boyfriend that you can be with, or, behave yourself, or you're gonna get fired. which I don't think technically they could do, but they're trying to get him to like straighten up his behavior. And so he calls on this guy that he knows who's very straight-laced, very serious, and says, you're going to be my fake boyfriend. So we have a fake dating trope, and you all know what happens in fake dating tropes. Yeah, feelings. But I really like the way that this one was wrapped up and handled, and that's all I better say. Up next, we have a teeny tiny little book called Chlorine Sky by Mahogany L. Brown. This is not only very small, but it is written in verse, so it's easy to read. This is about a girl whose friendship is changing. She's going through some life stuff. Her best friend has decided to just kind of unfriend her. And she gets her first boyfriend, and she's playing basketball and trying to be a good daughter, and things just are a struggle for her. So it's just kind of a slice of life little story about this young lady. Next, I read 14 Ways to Die by Vincent Ralph. This was picked for me as part of my January TBR by a coworker of mine and friend, and she chose this one purely based on the cover and said that she thought it looked pretty good, and it was. This was intense. So we followed Jess, whose mother was the victim of a serial killer, and Jess is now contracted to work for a reality show that's going to be on YouTube once a week. She's the Monday person, so they follow her all day on Monday, and then they'll upload like a highlight reel the next morning. But for the most part, they're just following her, and she wants to use this to gain attention for her mother's case, which has never been solved. The serial killer is the Magpie Man, and not only is the rest of the world watching her, but so is he. Dangerous things happen. There are people who come into her life that she might be able to trust, or she might not, and we don't really know who the killer is until that very dangerous moment when the killer is revealed, and holy crap, it was intense. But such a good read for a thriller, and for a young adult book. I took it right to school and said, you guys, if you're looking for a thriller or something to do with a killer thriller, read this book. Up next, I read Big Shot, which is book number 16 in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. This is the newest edition, and my copies took forever to get to me because Scholastic is very, very delayed these days. But this is another book about dear Greg Heffley. This time, his mom has told him he needs to join some kind of sport, and he joins the basketball team. And he gets put on what we would call in my school the B team, kind of the second string team. And they're so bad that they have to go to a tournament for people who've never won a game. Typical Wimpy Kid hilarity. Up next, I read The Las Cuentista by Donna Barba Higuera. This was so well written, and it was not what it was pitched to me as at all. I was told it was a Princess and the Pea retelling set in space. No, there was no Princess and the Pea. No. But this book recently won the Newbery. About a week after I finished reading it, the winners were announced, and there it was. So that's really exciting, and congratulations to the author. That's so exciting. But I will tell you what this book is about. We have Petra Pena, who is the daughter of scientists. She, along with her little brother and two parents, are put to sleep on a spaceship, intending that they will be sleeping for hundreds of years, and when this spaceship reaches a new planet, they will help set up a new civilization because Earth is about to be destroyed by a comet. Unfortunately, some things go wrong with the little microchip thing that goes into Petra's head. It's supposed to teach her a whole bunch of information while she's sleeping about science and about storytelling. Cuentista, the word from the title, means storyteller, and that's what she wants to be. When she wakes up hundreds of years later, she is the only person with any memories or stories from Earth, and she can't find her family. Where are they? Where are the other people? Why are there so few people that were supposedly just woken up? What's going on? And who is this weird collective that has taken over the ship? Weird stuff's happening. Go read this book. Go read it. Go read it right now. Next, we have The Hat Makers by Tamsin Merchant. I believe the sequel just barely came out very recently, so I'll be looking for that. The first book is about Cordelia Hatmaker, who belongs to a family of, you guessed it, hat makers. In this kingdom, we have King George, who is struggling with his job as a king, and he really needs to concentrate. So in the beginning of the book, we see the hat makers making a magically empowered hat to help him concentrate and do a good job. However, some things are going very wrong with the king, and he's starting to lose it. Also, there are things going wrong with all the other magical makers in the kingdom. We have boot makers, we have cloak makers, we have all different kinds of makers who serve the royalty and nobility, occasionally making these magically imbued clothing items. But Cordelia and the other families are noticing that some of their things are being stolen, including some items that are, in the Harry Potter world, they'd be called items of the dark arts that you'd buy in Nocturne Alley. They are kind of mischief-making items, and some of them have gone missing, as well as some other things that are important. So Cordelia and her best friend, who is a bootmaker, have to work together to solve the mystery of what's going on and hopefully stop a war between England and France before the world goes crazy. Then we have the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. You probably have read this book, or if you haven't, you've probably heard of it. Look at this cover. I mean, ha. This is about a fictional Hollywood starlet who's like super uber famous, and she has had 7 husbands. A writer, Monique, gets called to go interview Evelyn Hugo, and Evelyn Hugo says, I'm not just going to give you this magazine interview. I want you to write my autobiography, and after I die, you're going to release it. And we learn some things about Evelyn, like her journey to Hollywood, how she became a star, how she was able to work the system to create this career for herself, and she made some very intelligent moves, but also she had to do some really hard things to get there, and she was used and abused by more than one husband, and it just made me really think about, wow, how difficult is it for people to truly make it to that level of fame without sacrificing something of themselves. It's a lot. We also find out some secrets about her, which I'm not going to spoil because I don't want to ruin it for anyone who might read it later. Yeah. Very well worth the read, and it does live up to the hype that it got when it first came out a little while ago. My next read was Fire by Kristen Cashore. This is the second book in the Graceling series. It's technically a companion because it doesn't like follow along, but it is labeled as number 2 in the series. If I had known it was a companion, I don't know that I would have read it. I was all excited about Casta and Bitterblue and the other characters from the first book, and they weren't in here. Except for stupid Lek. Fire follows a girl named Fire. Has long, gorgeous red hair. Think like Merida from Brave, like captivating red hair. She is part monster, and she has the ability to control. And some things happen. She's got to protect her power, but she's also constantly under threat. And there's adventurous travel here. There is betrayal. There's love. There's loss. There's all kinds of chaos. And I'm going to tell you, I struggled getting through this book. See how big this is? It's also really nice and floppy, and the cover is gorgeous, but I really struggled getting through this. I want to go back to the series so that I can read Bitterblue and return to the characters from the first one, but if I had to choose all over again, I would say I'd probably skip this one. So next up, I read a book that one of my students lent to me. It is One of Us is Next by Karen M. McManus, so thank you, Charlotte, for the lend. I had a student bring this book to me, and she said, I've read this a couple times now. I think you should read it. So, of course, I did, and it is the sequel to One of Us is Lying. I liked it even better than the first one. We have some of the same characters from the first book and some different ones, and if you have any familiarity with the first one, you will know that it is set in a high school where 4 or 5 students go into detention, and one of them dies there, and the other 4, of course, suspected of his murder. And there's also the fact that the student who died is a gossip blogger and has spilled some pretty big secrets and knows some pretty pretty dishy secrets about the remaining 4. So there's a big investigation. I can't tell you how that all panned out because I totally ruined the first book for you, but I will tell you that we have some of the characters from the first book, like Maeve, and some new characters that have joined in. Cooper shows up a little bit in the second book, and we have another mystery, another danger, another death, another high school chaotic drama situation, and it was good reading. I would really recommend it. Next was Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lynn. So Where the Mountain Meets the Moon follows Minley, who works on a farm, and, oh, sorry, my neck is all stiff. Anyway, Minley works on a farm and her family is struggling, and she decides that she's going to go find a legendary figure from stories, the Old Man of the Moon. And so she embarks on this extraordinary journey to find the Old Man of the Moon and get his help. She's going to ask him how her family can change their fortune, and with all good luck, he'll give her the right answer and she'll be able to help her family. This was a, I don't want to say classic fairy tale, but it kind of read like that, full of Asian folklore, and like we've got dragons and tigers and all kinds of adventurous journey, and it was just a fun book. Next, we have to talk about Phantom Heart. Do you see the face of disgust I am making here? This book has such strong potential, and I did not feel it lived up to it. This is a Phantom of the Opera retelling. Like, how can you really screw this up? I struggled with this one, you guys. Like, had to force myself to get through it. I will say this, the atmosphere, great. It was super creepy atmosphere the entire time. I felt it. Other than that, all my compile scores were low. It was a struggle, a struggle, a struggle. Our main character has moved into this house that is supposedly this haunted mansion, and this creature person, maybe a ghost, maybe just a cursed person named Eric, supposedly lives there. But we're getting chapters told to us from Stephanie, who's the main character, and then Zedok, which is never really, like, at the beginning we're like, wait, I thought this person's name was Eric, but then the chapters are from Zedok. Is this the same person? It's super confusing. The curse that this person is under is never really fully explained. Stephanie at her new school makes friends with some kids that have a paranormal investigation team, and one boy in particular, like, immediately is crushing on her, and they kind of start to like each other, and he comes over to check things out, but she's told to never bring any of the investigators back again because Eric visits her in her dreams. We also have this element of extra creepiness because before she's aware of Eric, her younger sister is seeing Zedok and, like, drawing pictures of him, and it seems like he might be a demon. I'm still not exactly sure what all happened with the curse, though. The legend or backstory of the curse is that Eric was a young man in the Victorian era, and during that time there were a lot of groups who were really interested in the occult, and he got a mummy from Egypt and unwrapped the body, and because he unwrapped the body, it cursed his entire family, and he had to stay in the house forever. But it also doesn't make sense, and, like, at one point he takes a flower and puts it inside his chest to be a temporary heart, but it doesn't work. But then later Stephanie does the same thing and it does work, and, like, it was so confusing. I don't get it. If you guys have read this book and you understand it, please tell me what the heck I read. I didn't get how the curse worked. I didn't understand any of that. And the ending was ridiculous. And I'm not going to really spend more time talking about this book because I don't want to. But it was just ridiculous, and the dialogue was unbelievable and unrealistic and just bleh. I wanted to like this, but I just didn't. Fortunately, the last three books I'm going to talk about I did really enjoy, so we're going to move to Dear Evan Hansen. I listened to the audiobook, and I listened to it all just in one day. I was so enthralled by it. If you don't know the story of Dear Evan Hansen, it is a musical that was then novelized, and usually I don't like novelizations, but I enjoyed this one, as I said. It's also now a movie. It is about a young man, Evan Hansen, who has to write letters to himself by order of his therapist. And through a misunderstanding, a young man at his school who has committed suicide has one of these letters that Evan has written to himself, and they think that his family thinks that the boy who committed suicide wrote this letter to Evan and that they were friends. And Evan doesn't know how to say to this family, no, we weren't friends. He just has my letter. He's always had a crush on this boy's sister as well. And this family of this boy just kind of takes him in and like, oh, you are our son's best friend. Come to dinner all the time. Come hang out with us. Like, tell us more about this. And so it just starts this web of lies. Not only was the young man who killed himself struggling with mental illness and different things, but Evan is as well. And he's combating that in addition to dealing with a mom who's hardly ever home because she's working all the time, and all those lies that he's told, and trying to make friends. Like, he's one of those kids that just doesn't have many friends. So it's kind of a mess. But the story itself is so well done. And I haven't seen the musical or the movie, but definitely on my radar. So as I film this today, it is January 31st. Yesterday was January 30th, which was a Sunday. I finished 2 books, 1 physical book, 1 audiobook. So I'll talk about the physical book first. That is Bluebird by Sharon Cameron. This is a World War II historical fiction. I haven't read historical fiction much in the past couple of years, really, but this was wonderful. 5-star read. It is, we start off hearing from 2 different girls, telling different stories. So we have Inga and Eva. Inga is the German daughter of a Nazi doctor. He was one of those vile doctors who did experiments on people in the camps. She doesn't know what her father does, but when the end of the war comes and Hitler kills himself, some bad things happen to Inga, and she and a friend of hers are trying to make their way to safety and try to create some kind of life out of the chaos of what the war has become. We also have Eva, who has just arrived in New York City. She also has a friend with her, and she's from Berlin. She was not a camp survivor, but has been through a lot. She has what they called had a bad war, and she is staying at a kind of a refugee home in New York City, and they're helping her her and her friend get used to life in America and what that's like. And she makes a friend, Jake, and kind of starting to find her place there. But she also has some clandestine meetings with a group of men who are American agents. They all go by the name Mr. Crookshanks. And they are looking for her information on a specifically evil former Nazi. So we've got 2 different girls telling this story, and then their stories are going to meet up later. And there is a 3rd girl, Anna, who is a secret that both of them have some knowledge about. This book. Usually World War II fiction is not the most happy. I will tell you that hopeful things happen in this book, and there are some things that don't end well, and there are some things that do. But know going into it that we're dealing with heavy issues here. We're dealing with the Holocaust. We're dealing with people's lives being destroyed because one idiot, Hitler, decided to be a fascist dictator and try to take over the world. Yeah, there's a lot there, but as far as the writing of the book goes, very well done, and it was a great read. And my last book I'm going to tell you about, I finished listening to the audiobook at about 11 o'clock last night, and at the end of the book I had one of those what the actual heck just happened moments, because there's a major bomb dropped at the end of the first book. So of course I'm going to have to get the second book as soon as I possibly can find it, either an audio, Kindle, whatever I can do, to figure out what the heck's going on. But Backtrack, The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. This book is about Kiva, who is a healer at a prison. She's been there since she was 7, and she has learned and trained to be a healer. There is a strange illness going around the prison, so she's conducting investigations to try to find out what's going on there. But she also makes friends with one of the prisoners, which she's not really supposed to do. His name's Jaren, and she usually calls them by their numbers, but he insists on going by his name, and they become friends. There's also a little boy that lives at the prison, and he is just so sweet and adorable. He's kind of like a little brother to Kiva, and she really looks out for him. And eventually there is a prisoner brought to the prison who is supposed to go through what's called the trial by ordeal. This person is known as the Rebel Queen, and the trial by ordeal is intense. No one's ever lived through it. You have to go through 4 different ordeals: air, fire, water, and earth. So they're elemental trials, and if you can survive, then you can go free. But if you die, then you die. Well, as I said, no one's ever survived this. And when the Traitor Queen gets to the prison, she is in a rough shape. She's blind, she can hardly move, she's unconscious most of the time, and it is Kiva's job to try to revive her, get her ready for this trial by ordeal, in addition to all the other crazy stuff that's going on in the prison. As I said, there was a massive bomb dropped at the end of the book, and I need to stop talking about it because I'm going to spoil some things if I continue to discuss this. But if that sounds intriguing or interesting to you at all, highly recommend go get this book. It was so interesting. The characters were great. We have magic, we have prison, we have dystopian feels, we've got a possible rebellion in the kingdom, we've got all kinds of stuff going on, and who knows what will happen. So that brings us to the end of my January reading. I did better than I thought I was going to. I did get all 10 books on my TBR, so that means I get to have a reward. Maybe I will let myself pick out a couple of books on Amazon to purchase. I don't think I'm going to travel to a bookstore anytime soon just because I've got so much going on. You guys, can I just tell you something? I just had a Zoom with my grad school thesis director. I have my thesis defense date, which is May 2nd. That's 3 months away. I'm so scared. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up and sign off now. I am going to wish you all a wonderful, magical, and bookish day. Happy reading. Adios.